You're listening to the Mental Money Podcast, the show that shows you how to master your mind to maximize your money. This show is for people who love to watch their bank accounts grow while shifting their relationship to money. Without further ado, let's get these insider insights from today's leading expert. Hi, Ben. Thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with me and our listeners. I just want to kind of go over what we spoke about off record a little bit. We're going to take this segment and use it as an opportunity to go really resource heavy as far as those who don't know how to price appropriately. Where do they start? Like what can we give them to start them on the journey to pricing their products or services appropriately?
Sure, no problem. Before I get into that, I just want to say that initially setting prices when you're starting a business, there's a lot of mental challenges to do that because you might be thinking, oh, I've not done this before, I should charge a bit less. There's some self-worth stuff comes in there. Or if you've got, even if you've started your business for a little while, you've got some existing customers and you've set your prices perhaps a bit too low, it can be a bit hard to raise them.
Right.
So I understand that there's a lot of challenges around that there, and some of the tactics we'll go into on this episode will help with that.
Okay.
If you are setting your prices from scratch, there's one rule of thumb that if you do this, then it makes the rest of your business really, really easy to run and to grow for quite a long time in the business. So that rule of thumb is you start with whatever the cost to you will be of delivering the product or service, and you multiply that by 3.
Okay.
And if you do that, part of the reason why I say that, and it works for many businesses, is that if there's enough difference between the cost of what you're being paid to do and the price you charge the customers, then there's enough money left over there for paying a team to help you manage your whole business. There's enough money to pay for marketing. There's enough money for growth. There's also enough money to pay you, the business owner, for all your hard work and stress.
Of course.
So if you manage to get this ratio right, that's what I call the margin, the difference between the price and the cost of delivery. If you manage to get that right, it makes so many other things easier, and it gives you plenty of money left over to just throw money at the other problems that might come up in your business.
Of course.
Does that make sense?
Of course. No, that makes perfect sense. So what does getting it right look like? Like, let's say I used the example previously of like someone that wants to get into consulting. So let's switch gears and talk about someone who has a product. But for the sake of vanity, I'm going to say it's made in America. Sorry, Ben.
That's all right.
So it's made in America, which I'm sure you know it's going to cost a little bit more to produce the product because it's homegrown, and we typically have more for resources whenever we're creating a product. We charge more for resources when we're creating a product. So let's say the product costs $2 to produce, right? How do we determine the best practice for pricing it? Does it depend on industry? Does it depend on what it is? Should we determine its value first? Like, how do we start?
Yeah, so assuming that $2 includes like the raw materials, turning the raw materials into a product, all the shipping involved in getting the raw materials in and shipping off to the customers. So I'm assuming here that's all the costs in there.
Okay.
Using my rule, you would multiply that $2 by 3, and you would say that $6 is the minimum that you sell that product at.
Okay. And what would be the maximum? How would you determine what the maximum would be?
Oh, the maximum. That's actually a bit of an adventure in courage, that one. So you could look at the competitors or pricing for similar products as an indication of what the market is happy to pay for that kind of a product.
Okay.
But the best way is to actually set your prices and go out and try and get someone to pay those. Like I said, it's a bit of an exercise in courage, because you think, oh, well, surely if my price is lower, that means we're going to get more sales.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case. Like if you set your price too low, you'll go after customers that are really cheap and will just leave you as soon as they find somebody that's 5 cents cheaper.
Of course.
Whereas if you try and aim more in that, the higher you aim, you go for more of a premium image, premium branding, upmarket customers, they're generally less price sensitive.
Okay.
and easier to deal with.
That's that's been stated before. So I guess this is a theme that's going on here. So
Mm.
with that being said, it kind of the question came to mind, and it sparked the idea that maybe there might be some psychology to this. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there's biopsychology as well, but I'll leave that aside for the moment. Just talk about the business owner.
Okay.
Like I said, it requires some courage to raise your prices or
Right.
to set them in the first place.
Mm.
There's some self-worth issues like, do I deserve success? Is my product worthy of this higher price? All those sorts of things can come into it.
Interesting.
And
Have
so I usually sorry, you go.
no. You usually recommend.
I usually recommend to people that they look for some objective sources to help them get past the internal battles about setting prices. So you would look at what other people are charging and say, all right, I can charge that amount
Right.
because if that's what another business says their prices are, it means that they are 95% chance that they have customers that are happy paying those prices.
Mm-hmm.
So you could set your prices at what your competitors are. You can usually even set them a little bit higher than that because there's always a percentage of people that will go for the high value provider purely because it's the highest price. They will
Right.
assume that the quality is better.
Right.
So there's always, say, somewhere between 10 and 20% of customers um, in some markets will automatically go for the higher price, and there'll be like the bottom 10 or 20% of customers that will automatically go for the cheapest price.
Okay.
And then there's the people in the middle that you use your marketing talents to convince to buy from you as opposed to the other people.
Okay. So with that, with the psychological elements of the business owner, right? I want to kind of play around with that a little bit. Have you
Hmm.
ever worked with a client that had some psychological difficulties pricing based on like their self worth or self esteem, and how did you navigate that?
Yes, absolutely. Pretty much every client has
Okay.
that,
Okay.
and even I have it. Like it's never something that you entirely get over because you make progress on it, and I'll go into the tactics about how in a sec. But you'll make progress on it, and then so you'll increase your comfort level charging it one price, but then you've got to make progress on other issues or make more progress to be able to raise your price even further from that. So there will always be a bit of a challenge raising your prices, but you'll get better at recognizing the resistance and tackling it.
Okay.
So onto the specific tactics. Like I said before, looking for some objective feedback of like what are your customers, what are your competitors charging,
Okay.
or what do people charge in other regions. Like you may only be looking in your local area, but if you look, to the nearest big city or the next big city or another state, that can give you some other feedback. If you talk to your customers, ask your customers how happy they are with
Mm.
your product or service. Like, don't specifically ask about the price, but ask
Right.
them how happy they are. And normally, they will make a comment about the price. If if they say it's too cheap, then your price is really, really cheap.
Okay.
Because if it's a little cheap, a customer's not going to tell you because they don't want you to raise the
Of
price.
course.
But if they're happy and they think it's super cheap, they'll actually say that. If they say they're happy with it, but they would like it if the price was a little lower, you just ignore that because that's just someone trying to save a little bit of money. It's not
Mm.
honest feedback that
Of
you should
course.
listen to.
Right.
Um, Another way to tell is if you're having a sales conversation with somebody. I often like conversations as opposed to just like email or people clicking on a website because in a conversation you can get more valuable feedback.
Okay.
And if you're having a conversation, a sales conversation, and nobody objects to your price, then it means your price is too low.
Okay.
The general benchmark is if a third of the people resist the price. Not that they say, no, I'm not going to work with you, you're too expensive. But if people say, oh, that seems a bit expensive. If a third of the people are saying that, then your price is about right.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say the
So
opposite. That's interesting.
No,
Okay.
no. The idea here is if nobody's complaining about the price, well, then you've set it too low. You want some complaints.
Okay.
Um, yeah, it's a bit counterintuitive, I know.
Yeah, that is. Okay. Is there any
Hmm.
other tactics that we should know about?
Um,
Or
Journaling, or talking through with somebody like why exactly you think your prices are too high or why exactly you think you can't raise the price. So getting there might be like this nebulous, undescribed fear, and that's what fear usually is. Once you name a fear and you describe a fear, it's easy to conquer. So
right.
if you actually describe why you think you can't raise your price, then that will also give you it will highlight things that aren't reasonable for you to think, like, oh, no one will pay my price. Well, let's check that. We'll go see what our competitors charge. Yep, someone's definitely going to pay that price.
Right.
So it can remove incorrect facts that you believe, but it's also it maybe there are some legitimate reasons why you can't raise your price. Like maybe there's a problem with your customer service, maybe your quality isn't so good, but then it gives you things to actually work on and you can do something about it and then you can go raise your price.
That
So
makes sense.
yeah. Mm,
So okay, and this kind of goes into marketing a little bit. So forgive me for branching off a tad bit, but
that's all right.
it still does get to the heart of the matter as far as prices are concerned.
Hmm.
So what what about paying for perception? I mean, like the value's there. You know that the price is good.
Hmm.
Is it fair to price higher because the cost is perceivably, or the value is perceivably greater than what it's actually worth? Does that make sense? Am I asking the right question?
Yeah, yeah. So what you're talking about here is instead of just pricing based on cost, instead you price on the value that it's going to give to the customer.
Right.
Yeah, and that's definitely that was one of the tactics I was going to come to. So
Okay.
the rule of thumb I gave before was you take your cost, you multiply it by three, and that's the minimum you should charge.
Mhm.
Um, I generally prefer to be pricing based on value whenever possible.
Okay.
I mean, if you have a commodity type product like toilet paper, um, yes, that's kind of valuable in a way, but you can't really price on value because there's so much competition and it's easy for other people to replicate all that sort of stuff.
Right.
But if you're doing a service or a product that's going to have give your customers a big improvement in their business,
Mhm.
so people selling marketing services, they know how to do this really well.
Of course.
Is that say a person selling a marketing service will generally price their services about 10% of the result they get for their client.
Mm.
Um, Regardless of what it actually costs the marketer to do, they might set it based on the results that they can get because it's a super valuable service. If there's no sales coming into a business because the marketing's poor, then you don't have much of a business.
Right.
And it's the same thing like the service that I provide for my clients. Part of what I do for some of them is help them stay in business. So without me, there is no business. So it's a valuable thing that's being provided. In terms of to give a product example, um, for some people who are selling a product that's going to be then sold by their customer. So, say you're a manufacturer, you sell to a wholesaler or a retailer, and they
Mhm.
have another customer they're going to sell to. You should be keeping in mind how much they're going to charge
Mm.
when you're setting your prices. Um, the wholesaler and the retail, they're going to want to mark up their prices. They
Of course.
multiply it by at least three times themselves. So you've got to allow them to have some profit. Don't be too greedy.
Right.
Um, but if the thing that you provide, the service or the product that you provide to your customers, if that's much more valuable than what it costs you to do, then you should be charging some portion of that value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. That's so interesting. All right. So, one the episode to kind of cover, like we spoke about before, is resources. Where can we get
Hmm.
online? What should we be looking at? Who should we be talking to? Give us some guidance.
Okay, yep. So, researching the competition, you can usually just look at people's websites. You can walk into their store or their factory or office. You can give them a call.
Okay.
Um, speaking, if you're running a larger business or intending to run a larger business and your competitors have sales teams, then they can be a fantastic source of information
Right.
because they're really happy to tell anyone whatever they might want to know, just in case it turns into a sale. So you can do quite a lot of good research there by calling the sales teams.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's also there's a number of benchmarking and business reports and things that you can just do a Google search or even sometimes look in a public library
Mm-hmm.
for to find out a lot of useful information about other businesses, even like more than just their pricing. Sometimes you can get a bit of some general information about their costs,
Right.
where their suppliers are, and how many people they have on their team. All that sorts of information is usually publicly available,
Okay.
either on a website or like on these benchmarking reports.
Okay.
There's also, for people who are freelancers or consultants, there's a lot of marketplaces online where you can have a good look at your competitors. So Upwork is one. There's also Fiverr, Fiverr.
Right.
There's freelancer.com. There's TopTal, TOPTAL for developers.
Okay.
Um, Also, you can look at another way to look at setting your prices is to, if you're a consultant or a service provider, is you could go have a look at job ads to see how much people are willing to pay to employ someone to do that.
That's
Uh,
good advice. Wow. Yeah, that's a really good idea.
yeah, and
Yeah.
then you can multiply that number by two or three because you're a consultant and you're not working full time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you could that's even a potential source of leads. Like some people who are looking to hire their first um, internal marketing person or their first internal operations manager. If it's the first time they've hired a particular role and it's reasonably critical for the business, then you could say, hey, why don't you try me out as a contractor first? You
Right.
don't have to pay me full time, only use what you need, all that sort of stuff there.
Right. Right. That makes sense.
Mm.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ben. That's actually really helpful, and I'm honestly gonna steal like two or three of those, just for the sake of
Awesome.
necessity.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's been really helpful. I appreciate you. And tell us where we can find you online.
Yeah, so I'm very originally hiding online behind my name, Ben
Okay.
McAdam,
Okay.
MCADAM
Mhm.
.me is my website, or you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. Technically, I'm on Twitter and Instagram, but not really. So
Okay.
Facebook, LinkedIn, or my website are the best place to find me.
Okay. Perfect. And you have a podcast, don't you?
I do,
Talk
yes.
to us about that, Ben. Shamelessly plug. Plug away.
I Yeah, so the podcast is businessnumberspodcast.com,
Okay.
so
Perfect.
fairly easy to remember.
Okay.
I'm having a little holiday from it for the moment, but it's 39 episodes there. There's a lot of guests I've interviewed who share like their tactics, what worked for them, all the problems they came up with, and there's also a few Q&A episodes where
Perfect.
it's just me answering a listener question.
Perfect. Okay, that's great. All right, so I'm going to plug all that information in the caption so that people can make themselves familiar with you at benmcadams.me and the businessnumberspodcast.com. I've actually kind of dug around and found some information that you've posted, and it's been really useful. And I really greatly appreciate the time that you've taken to speak to me and the people that I reach out to. I don't think that this will be the last time we speak. And look, like I have a really hard time letting go of people. I'm like, no, let's talk about everything. So I say that a lot. Like, don't think it's fluff. Like, I really hope that we do get the chance to speak soon again about maybe another related topic.
Sounds good. Happy to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Mental Money Podcast. Please go ahead and remember to subscribe, but don't hoard all of this good information for yourself. Share this information with someone that you know could use it, especially if they need a shift in their mindset or someone who would love to have more money. So until we meet again, remember, like Uncle Snoop said, keep your mind on your money and your money on your mind.